Hi, this is Sharon Colvin. It is January 2016, and this is my very first video of the year. And this is What is Sharon Reading, which is part of my series with book reviews for you to use for your libraries. So let me give you a quick view of how to get to this on the website in case you haven't seen it before. This is our website right here, libraries.vermont.gov. And then if you click down here on Services for Vermont Libraries, and then you click on Children and Teens, either here on the left or in the center, right there. And then the best place to get you started is the Youth Services Toolkit. I put this together for youth services librarians. It has everything you could possibly need, links to the newsletters, to the different listservs, summer reading information. If you haven't signed up for the summer reading workshop, you should definitely do that. Continuing education information, book awards information, programming information, and then right here, readers advisory and collections. And then it'll take you right here to my list of videos, and you can go ahead and bookmark that if you want to. This series up here on the top is the new books that I receive here in the office, and I do a quick review of the ones I think are exciting and tell you about them every month. And then down here is What is Sharon Reading, and this is a recap of what I've been reading, because I read a lot, and what I think of it. So this link here will go right there as soon as I'm done. And if you need more help, this is definitely a place to come. There's some information if you're looking at the Canfield Fisher books with your class or in your library. This is my review, just a quick recap of my favorite books on the list. And then down here, there's summer reading books from last year. I'll update that as soon as the new one's out. And then how to use Library Thing, which is the resource I'm going to be showing you in a minute. And this is one of my favorite resources here. This is through the Mid-Continent Public Library, and it's a really good way to get series information of especially the ones that don't have numbers on them. Don't you hate those? So there's lots of information, and if you keep going, there's just more and more. So welcome. I'm going to be using this resource here. It's called Library Thing. If you've never seen it before, welcome. This is what I use to catalog all the books that I read, the chapter books that I read, and I read a lot of them. You can tell I have 1,200 books in here. I have been cataloging them almost for 10 years, so it's a lot. So let's see where I ended last time. Okay, I ended right here with Tiger Boy. And so the next book I want to talk about is called Sweet by Emmy Laybourne. You know, there's not a link here anymore, so let me pull it up on Amazon so you can see the cover. So Emmy Laybourne wrote one of my favorite books called Monument 14, which was a wonderful dystopia story about kids who are trapped in the equivalent of like a super Walmart. And I love that story. It's really, really wonderful. And this book that came out, it's not as good as that one. You know, it kind of follows in the heels of some, you know, fairly tragic dystopia ripoffs that have been happening. However, this is an amusing book. I actually read it while I was on a cruise, which just amused me to no end. And if you know me, you know that's just how I roll. So this book takes place on a cruise, actually, which is why it made it funny. And it's a horror book. You wouldn't believe it by thinking about, you know, looking at the cover and thinking about the author, but this is hardcore horror. And so if you have zombie fans in your library, they might like this one. So basically, this story is about this new sweetener called Solu, which is an abbreviation for solution. And it's been created by this big company, the equivalent of like Pepsi or Splenda. And not only is it a sweetener, but it's supposed to help you lose weight really fast, which we know is just not going to end well, right? And so this story is about these two best friends. It's Viv and Laurel, and they go on this cruise, and this company has launched this celebrity cruise to launch the media for this new sweetener. And it's ridiculous, ridiculously hilarious. It's like a game show or reality show. So basically everyone gets on the ship, and some are celebrities and some are just really rich, like Laurel's friend Viv, and are able to score tickets onto this cruise, and they're all weighed and measured before they get on the boat. And they set their goals for how much weight they're going to lose, and I think they tell them they'll lose like 20% of their weight by the end of the week-long cruise. And they do the ridiculous thing where, because Laurel is not buying it, she's been dragged on, and she thinks it might be kind of cool to go on a cruise, but the whole weight loss thing, she's kind of chubby, but she's not interested in it, and she thinks it's creepy. It turns out she's right. And so at the beginning, they look at the cruise ship and they paint a big black line where the water hits the boat, and they say they claim that the boat will be visibly lighter when it comes back into harbor. And of course, Laurel looks at them and says, "What? What about the trash? What about all the waste? What about all the water?" And she ruins the facade for them. So anyway, what happens is that she becomes friend with Tom, who is this child star. He used to be very chubby, and now he's on this really strict diet, and he works with a trainer, and his trainer has told him absolutely no fake sugar, absolutely none. And so he's not eating any of it. And of course, Laurel is suspicious of it, and so she won't eat any of it. And basically, they're the only two on the cruise ship who don't eat this stuff, and it sets up this hilarious kind of story because everyone becomes addicted to this sugar, and they become so addicted to it that they start killing each other to get it, and they're losing weight at these alarming rates. And so they kind of look like living skeletons, and now they're killing each other. And it gets to the point, if you're queasy about blood, close your ears for a sec. Okay, so just imagine they can smell if you've eaten this stuff, and these people will kill you just to drink your blood if it has the fake sweetener in it. So gross. But I will tell you that I have the sense of humor of a 14-year-old boy, and I thought it was kind of awesome. And they kind of got what was coming to them, and it's a happy ending sort of at the end. And I mean, she loses her best friend, which is rough, but it's all zombies and they're killing each other, and that's pretty scathing social commentary right there. And I think this could be an interesting book club book. And it's definitely something that you could hand to either a boy or a girl who's interested in this kind of violent, alternate reality stories. So that's my spiel on it. As far as quality goes, I mean, it's not going to win any awards, that's for sure. But hey, who needs to win awards? So yeah, I think this book was. Oh, she also plays guitar, classical guitar, which is really, I think, a cool little detail about her. So it's definitely it's a departure from the traditional body image type stories. All right, next, to change paces completely, the sequel to Calpurnia Tate. So I trust that you've read the original book, which is here, The Evolution of Calpurnia Tate. It came out in 2011, which seems like forever ago. It's fantastic, won all types of awards. However, and I think it was a Canfield Fisher book as well, this is one of those books that was really hard to sell to the kids. I almost feel like it was written, I'm not sure, for librarians maybe. I'm not sure I want to be that harsh, but it definitely appeals to librarians. It appeals to those of us who love historical fiction, but it's really a hard sell to the kids. Part of it is this cover. This cover is terrible. Well, it's not terrible. It's just boring, and the kids aren't interested in it. So this is my my little side story, and that is that I love Calpurnia Tate. I think it's a phenomenal book, and so of course I picked up the sequel. I will tell you that I have forgotten because a lot has happened in 5 years, and my brain doesn't hold on to details that well anymore. That's why I use something like library thing. So this is a standalone book, is my point of that little deviation. It's a standalone book. You don't have to have read the first one. Definitely not. It's not as good as the first one, but I definitely think that if you have kids in your library who love the book, or if you love the book, you should give it a try. It takes place in that time where, women are not expected to do great things with their lives. This is about Calpurnia. She's 13, and her family expects her to grow up and be a wife and raise kids, and but she wants to be like her grandfather. She wants to be a scientist. And so this story is a little different, though. it focuses kind of on a lot of the other characters in the family, and one of them is her younger brother Travis. And Travis, he loves animals, loves them so much, and he's always taking in strays. He has an armadillo, he has a raccoon at one point, and he has to hide them because his family thinks they're trouble, and of course they are, and he can't keep them in control. And so Calpurnia helps him, save the lives of a lot of these animals, but some of it's hard, and so she's not sure. And then the town vet starts visiting the house to take care of some of these animals, and they start having conversations, and she becomes kind of his assistant, which is unusual. And the natural choice for that would be Travis, the boy, but it's really Calpurnia that has the talent for it, and that's a struggle. It's not something that people are used to seeing in this time, and the family is really struggling. Travis should be the vet, not Calpurnia, but Travis is afraid of blood, so that's not a great choice for him. So it's really interesting. There's also a not side story, but interwoven in it. There was a giant storm in Texas, and her family, some of her family got displaced, and her cousin comes to stay with them, and their cousin is older and just does not understand Calpurnia at all, and they end up having some conflict. So there's a lot of family pieces to this. I think it's a good story. If you like historical fiction, I think it's definitely worth it. Some issues of feminism and what it means to be a girl in this time when rules are changing and science was not something that girls took part in, is definitely, I think interesting. Not all kids are going to find it that interesting though. So, it is what it is. How's that? All right, let's move on. Night on Fire. I really loved this book, and this book, I will tell you, I'm trying desperately to get the folks on the Canfield Fisher Award Committee to consider this one. The cover is a little bland, but it's a really wonderful story. It takes place in Montgomery during the Freedom Riders. So it takes place in the 1960s, and it's about this 13-year-old cop named Billy. And she lives in Alabama, and she is really struggling with the idea of segregation, and she doesn't understand what the big deal is. Why not integrate? I don't understand. And of course, the adults have other opinions about it. And it just so happens that the Freedom Riders come through her town, and she witnesses firsthand some of the violence, and she has a really hard time kind of understanding and putting together the fact that these people are her neighbors and these people are her family, and yet they either took part in these violent kind of demonstrations, or they just watched and let it happen. And this was kind of eye-opening for her, and she just doesn't understand how people are allowing this kind of brutality to happen to people who didn't do anything. And so she's very good friends with her housekeeper, who's black, and she starts talking to her, and she really isn't understanding what's going on. And I can't remember the housekeeper's name. I'm terrible with names. And so she I'm not going to find it. Anyway, she starts talking to her. Lavender, that's it, Lavender. I knew it wasn't pretty. Lavender is the maid, and she starts talking to her about, segregation and racism and what does it mean. And it's funny. She comes to this realization, she experiences something different because she's black. And she meets Lavender's daughter, who wants to go and witness the Freedom Riders, and she wants to hear Dr. King speak. And so Billy goes on an adventure with her, and it's fascinating because, Billy's naive and she's idealistic, and so she gets on a bus with another girl who's older than her but who's black, and she has to start thinking about things she's never thought about before, like where does she wait? Where does she sit? Who does she talk to? Is she going to be stared at? And, she really has never thought about these things. And I think especially for kids in Vermont who haven't experienced racism firsthand, this could be really eye-opening for them. And I think, living this story through Billy's eyes could be definitely worth discussing. So, it's a big adventure. She ends up going, and she, of course, scares the bejesus out of her parents, and because she disappears, and she does end up hearing Dr. King speak, and it's pretty amazing. So, and she has some frank conversations with her parents about what does it mean to be a bystander and what does it mean to be racist. So, this period of time is not one that kids, I think, talk about very much. The early 1960s are full of history and important events, but it may not be the most popular kind of time period, but I think it's definitely worth discussing. Really, really good discussion book. Highly, highly recommended. All right, darkest part of the story. Now, I'm going to tell you right up front that this book is weird. I am not a huge fantasy fan, so I am completely biased. If you have kids that are, they might really like this book. I thought it was a quality book, but again, weird. Holly Black, I can appreciate her writing, but like I said, I'm not a big fantasy fan. So take that however you like. So this book, this is interesting, and part of the reason I think it's interesting is because it has parallels to things like society's expectations of people, what you're responsible for, and of course racism. And it's folded into this fairy story. So this story takes place in a town called Fairfold, where you have the fairies and then you have humans, and they all live together. And they're called the folk, and they kind of live in this tense kind of standoff where the folk exist kind of in the forest, and the humans take place. They live in the town, and they kind of have an invisible line between them. And these kids, Hazel and Ben, they've been telling these crazy stories their whole life, and it turns out that the fairies have given Ben some magic powers, and it comes with these wonderful talents and music and things like that, but it also comes with these powers that he can't control. And when some weird things start happening in the town, they start blaming the folk, and because Ben has these powers, he gets lumped in with them, and it becomes really confusing. It's a lot. The setting of this book is almost like a character. It's incredibly lush. It's really great. It's phenomenal description. I had a lot of trouble holding on to a lot of the characters. It's very dreamy, a lot of kind of, I couldn't keep track of what was going on. There's a fairy king in there, and he's kind of evil, and there's all these family problems, and I don't know. But I will say that there are some interesting discussion points here, and it's not, I've heard it described as not Holly Black's best work, but it could be an interesting addition to your collection if you have people in your library who like high fantasy. So there you go. The story of Diva and Flea. This is a young one. So if you know Mo Willems, he wrote the Elephant and Piggy books, and I adore them. And this is his newest collaboration with Tony DiTerlizzi. I thought this book was just okay. I wish I could open it up and show you. It's mostly, it's not Mo Willems' art. He tells the story, and Tony DiTerlizzi did a lot of the illustrations. So the style is different, but it's about this street cat. It's kind of like Lady and the Tramp. You have a street cat and you have this very loved dog, and they live in Paris. And the street cat introduces the dog to some adventures and some new parts of the world. It's recommended for grades 2 to 4. I might even say a little younger than that. It's very short. It's definitely a beginning chapter book. Lots of pictures. There are occasional French words in the books, but nothing terrible. I definitely don't speak French. It's beautifully put together, but I didn't find that there was too much there. It read a lot like an easy reader, which is fine, but it's definitely not a chapter book material. It just isn't enough to it. So you might, if you need more easy readers, and this could be good. But if you're looking for something of substance, you could probably skip it, which is sad. Okay, Undertow. All right, Michael Buckley wrote this book. The cover's kind of weird. It's very dark. This is an interesting story. I wish it had been a little shorter, maybe a little tighter. But it's an interesting story. If you have kids in your library who like dystopia, then this could be a good choice. So this is a story about this world. It takes place in Coney Island, and there are this mer people who are called the Alpha, and they live in the ocean. And you have the townsfolk who obviously live on land, and it opens with this character. Her name is Lyric, and she it's the first day of school when the Alpha are allowed to integrate into the schools, and it's very similar to Brown versus Board of Education, where the government has said you have to integrate, ready, set, go, and the people are very nervous, and they're convinced that these people are going to kill them, and the news is there, and they aren't sure they want to do it, and they're being forced by the government. But in this instance, these people might really kill them because they're enormous and they have powers, and some of them have spears in their arms, and they have waltzed into the school, and Lyric is not sure what's going on. Her father is a police officer, so she definitely has a different perspective there, and she gets kind of pegged by the principal, who's this kind of mysterious guy who we're not sure if he's a government agent or police, or we're not sure. And he pairs her up with a member of the Alpha to kind of assimilate, I think, and kind of prove that they can be friends. And when it's successful, he starts doing that with more people, only it doesn't always go that well. Anyway, the underlying mystery is that it turns out that Lyric's mom is an Alpha, and so she's actually a half Alpha, half human, and that is very, very much frowned upon in this society. And so she has to hide that, but she has a great deal of empathy for these people who are coming in and are hated by her classmates. So I think there's a lot of fodder for discussion in this book. It's long. I really feel like after you get to the middle of it, it drags a lot. But the kids might find it different. There's a lot of fighting. There's a lot of just kind of craziness going on in the towns. The ending is okay, I guess. And it's definitely going to be a series, which it kind of bugs me when they do that. But, it's grades 8 and up. I would definitely agree with that. And if you have kids who like this kind of series, then it could be a good discussion. Worth trying out. All right, let's go on to something better. Ruby on the Outside. All right, I read this book in an afternoon, and I loved it. I'm going to show you the cover. This is Nora Baskin. She wrote, she wrote, yeah, I'm not going to remember now. Let's look, Helen, shall we? I'm taking one. Anything But Typical. That's the one she wrote. Really, really good. Won a Schneider Book Award. I knew there was something. Sorry, a little tangent. Okay. She is an amazing writer. This is a really, really good story, and I kind of like the cover. So this is a story about a girl named Ruby. She's 11, and she's about to start middle school, which is a very, very hard time, as we know. And her mom's in prison, and she's never asked why. And she lives with her aunt, and she's never really had a lot of close friends, and she's always been kind of afraid of people finding out that her mom's in prison. And so, she goes and visits her mom all the time, but she doesn't want to tell anybody that. And I think this is something that needs to be talked about. And so she meets this friend named Marguerite who moves into the condo complex, and they become really close friends. But she feels the weight of this secret, and she's not sure if she should tell her. But she knows that Marguerite understands her in this weird way, and she comes to find out that her brother had died, and that's part of why they had moved. And Ruby starts to wonder if maybe her mom was somehow related to what happened to this girl's brother, because she never knew what happened to put her mom in prison. So she gets very, very worried. And so she starts asking questions and really wondering about what happened. And the story, it's a little sugar-coated. It's a middle grade book. So the mother took responsibility for something that maybe legally she shouldn't have taken responsibility for, which is usually not the case. But for the purposes of fiction, I think it's an okay choice. I think the emotional impact of this book is wonderful. I definitely think you should have a copy of this book. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful story. They recommend it for grades 4 to 6. I think so. Although, your fourth graders might have some questions about things like prison and not living with your mom. That could be kind of hard depending on the fourth grader. But if you have people in your schools or in your libraries who struggle with this issue, this is definitely something you should look into. Highly recommend it. All right. Another one I highly recommend that's on a completely different note is Space Dumplins. There we go. It's a graphic novel. I read it in an hour. And you need it. You just have to buy it. I'm telling you right now. I'm so demanding. You have to buy this book. This book is phenomenal. This is some of the inside art. This takes place in outer space. And it's about this little girl, and she has these parents. Her mom is a fashion designer, and her dad is a logger. Now, in this world, they use whale poop as fuel. Whales just float around in the outer space. And so her father is one of the people who collects the whale poop to be used as fuel, and he's called a logger. You get it? I know, it's gross. There's a lot of subtle poop humor, which of course I make not subtle because I talk about it all the time, but it's hysterical. So basically what happened was that there was a big accident, and one of the whales got sick and had diarrhea, only that's not what they call it in the book, and basically it floods parts of outer space. And this little girl, her name is Violet. She lives in kind of a space trailer park, which I think is hysterical. And when her school is destroyed by this flood, I can't remember what they have a euphemistic name for it, which is hysterical. It's like the event or something. Anyway, so her parents are trying to find her a new school, and so she goes to work with her mom, and then her dad gets in trouble, and it's whole adventure kind of stuff. The art is fantastic. It's bright. This is a big size book. It's got some heft to it, but I highly, highly recommend it. I think it's wonderful. It's hysterical. Your kids, especially, I'd say you could even go down to fourth grade, because it's graphic. They're going to just die at the bathroom humor. I mean, like, again, it's not overt. It's definitely, it's quiet, but they'll bring it out just like I am, and they're going to love it. So you should definitely get it. It's a wonderful addition to your graphic novel collections, because who doesn't need some whale poop in outer space, right? Things I never thought I would say. All right, let's move on to something a little more serious. Stella by Starlight. This is another one that we are considering for the Canfield Fisher Award list. Sharon Draper is one of my all-time favorite authors. Wonderful, wonderful story. This book is it's a quieter book, but it deals with some very, very big issues. I think this is a perfect book for right now because we are talking a lot about the civil rights movements and the right to vote. And I think that it's timely. This is something the kids can relate to. So Stella lives in North Carolina, and it's segregated, and she's black, and so she lives in a certain part of town and isn't allowed to go to the other part of town, and they go to a certain school, and she doesn't wear shoes. None of her friends wear shoes, the idea of buying some is not possible and also a little strange to her. And one day they're pretty happy, but one day the Klan comes to town, and the kids are sneaking around, of course, where they're not supposed to be, and they see the Klan in the forest, and the hooded people are really frightening, but they recognize some of the horses and some of the shoes, and they start to wonder if they're people that they know, and it starts them on this really interesting kind of journey of what does it mean to be black? What does it mean to be in this segregated community? And in the middle of all of this, the vote is happening, and of course, in this time in history, there were those terrible tests that black people had to take before they could vote, and they had to study for them, and they had to pay all this money just to be allowed the right to vote, which anyone else, the white men, were allowed to vote just by walking in. And so the men in the town decide that they want to go to the registrar and register to vote, and they're made to go through all these hoops, and Stella's father takes her with him so that she can see this in action, and it's just wonderful. It's heartbreaking, but it's also really, really wonderfully done. And part of the story is about being part of this town, and not everyone believes that it should be segregated, and a lot of people are genuinely good, and one of their houses catches on fire, and there are definitely people from both sides who are there to help, and some of them are married to people who are part of the Klan, and that's confusing, I think, to anybody. But Stella is really struggling with this, and at the same time, Stella is struggling in school. She's struggling to write, and like a lot of us, she's having trouble putting her thoughts down on paper, and so she practices at night so that no one can see her, and so she sits out on the back porch steps and she writes in her journal, and the teacher is trying to help her build her writing skills. But of course, when the Klan comes to town, it's not safe anymore. So it's something. This is full of things to talk about. So wonderful, wonderful book. Let's see what they recommend, grades 4 to 8. I think that's pretty good. Although fourth grade's a little young. I think this is a really, really good discussion book. It's well written, really well presented, and I hope it makes the list. But I don't always get my way. It's sad that I'm kidding. So let's see. Another awesome book, Ticket to India. This is written by the author of Shooting Kabul. And look at that wonderful cover. So this is a story, it's kind of a fantastical story of a girl named Maya. She's 12, which in that part you're not going to believe when you read this, but it's kind of a fantasy story. So basically what happens is that so you have Maya and her big sister Zara, and they go to Delhi because their grandfather has passed away, and they go to see her grandmother. And no, I'm sorry, they go to Pakistan because that's where her grandmother lives. And it turns out her grandmother actually grew up in Delhi, in India. And there was a lot of information in here about the politics and the Great Partition and the separation of India and Pakistan, stuff that I'd never heard before. I don't know a lot of history from that region, but it's fascinating, and it's not presented in a boring way. I think it's fascinating. But there are, the grandmother does tell some very long stories, so you have to be invested in it to get through it. And so anyway, they're in Pakistan, and the grandmother is saying that she really wants to go to India, and because there's something that she buried when she left India that she wants to put in her husband's coffin. And so she takes off with her granddaughters, and they travel by train to India. And of course, the grandmother gets sick and they have to leave her, and the two girls travel by themselves, and they run into all sorts of characters, not very good ones. They have a brush with human trafficking. One of them gets kidnapped at one point. It's all very sugar coated, and the author tries to do a lot. But I think the descriptions of the towns are really remarkable. And they meet a lot of really interesting people from different walks of life, and they learn a lot about the history of the area. So it's pretty good. I would recommend it. It's not the most realistic book ever written, but it could be a good adventure if people are interested. They say grades 4 to 7. Yeah, maybe a little older. It kind of depends on the kid and if they're interested in the region. And if they like shooting Kabul, they could definitely give this one a whirl. All right, how about another graphic novel, Tomboy? I loved this book. You will notice on my my little star ratings, I don't give 5s very often. It has to be a pretty spectacular book to get a 5. And this one got a 5. This book is a memoir. It's by Liz Prince. And it's a graphic memoir, and it's about her life as a kid. And Liz grew up as a tomboy, and that was the label that she was given because she didn't want to wear dresses and she didn't want to wear frou-frou things, and she wanted to play baseball and run with the boys, and she was really struggling with this. And this book is basically about her struggle of kind of embracing the tomboy label and becoming her own kind of tomboy. And what does it mean to be your own kind of girl and to define what girl means to you? And I think this is a very timely novel. Kids today are really struggling with gender identity, and what does it mean to be a boy? What does it mean to be a girl? And what does that mean in terms of my gender identity, my sexuality, and my place in the world? And I think this is very timely, and I think it's really good. I mean, it is one person's story, which I think is a good thing because it's not couched in any other kind of context. It's just Liz Prince's story, and I think kids will understand that, or teens will understand that when they're reading it, and I think her adventures and her parents there's some hysterical parts of this book. And in the end, you can see her picture of, what it means to be a tomboy at, age 30 something, which I thought was just adorable too. And there is quite a bit of swearing in this book. It's very frank. There are definitely a couple of F-bombs. Other than that, the content is not super mature, but it's definitely written. The author writes as though she's writing to a peer, so she's not talking down to anybody, which is wonderful. I think the teens will really, really like that. But especially if you're in a school, you want to limit this to the high school. And if you're in a public library, this definitely goes in your YA collections, because the swearing is going to turn some people off. I think this is a wonderful, wonderful book, and I highly recommend you add it to your collection. I think it's just one of a kind. Lovely, lovely story. Okay, next. All right, let me see. Yeah, these one-word titles make searching hard. Okay, Calvin, this cover's bizarre to me. This is a really unusual book, and we had some interesting conversations in the GMBA committee about this book. I really liked it. Not everyone did, but I really liked it. However, I have a soft spot for books about mental illness. I think they're necessary, and I think books that that do it well are pretty amazing. And this one I think does it well, and it leaves a lot up for discussion. So this is about a boy named Calvin. He's 17 and he's in high school, and this is kind of a flashback journal kind of thing. Um, and he tells the story of his adventure in this flashback. And he tells you right up front that he has schizophrenia, and that, and that he struggled with this, for a long time. But he says, but this is my story. This is the crazy life that I live. And so his name is Calvin. He was born on the day that the last Calvin and Hobbes comic strip was published. You might remember that day. I remember it well. And so he feels tied to this cartoon, and he was given a stuffed tiger when he was a baby, named Hobbes, of course. And he had a best friend named Susie, of course, and it's all very parallel to the comic strip. And for his mental illness, that I think sparked something. And so as a kid, he had an imaginary friend named Hobbes, who came alive after his stuffed animal was disintegrated in the washing machine. And his imaginary friend would talk to him, and they'd have adventures. And then he went away for a while, and then he came back. And when he came back, he scares him. And it's kind of hard to say, he's definitely seeing a doctor, and he's definitely getting treatment. He's having trouble focusing in school because Calvin is seeing Hobbes around every corner, and this tiger is talking to him. At any rate, it kind of devolves into this grand adventure where he and this friend of his go out on this trek. So he finds Susie, who hasn't talked to in years, and the two of them go out on a trek to find the author of Calvin and Hobbes and can convince him to write another comic strip. And Calvin is convinced that that's going to help him. And so they go on an adventure across a frozen, I think Lake Erie maybe, across the lake, frozen lake, and they have all this gear with them, and it's this crazy, crazy adventure. They meet all these crazy people. And a couple of times he alludes to the fact that, this might be in my head. I'm not sure if that really happened. I'm not sure if that person really existed, which I think is fascinating. And then it kind of ends kind of abruptly. And I think the best part about this book is you never know. Did it really happen, or is it just all in his head? I don't know. I don't know that there's an answer to that. And I think the kids would have fun discussing that. Is it part of his mental illness? Did he ever really talk to Susie? Did they ever really go on this adventure? Or is it just too fantastical? Did he make it all up? And I think this is it's an interesting look into schizophrenia and delusion, kind of what it means to have a delusion. And it's also kind of an interesting parallel to this comic strip, which kids today might not know about, but they should. Let's be honest, it's the best. All right, let's move on to another awesome book. This book, there we go. This book is phenomenal. It's called The Porcupine of Truth. It's by Bill Konigsberg, who wrote Openly Straight, which was not my favorite book, but was well received. I love the cover of this book, and one of my colleagues has been trying to get me to read it for months, and I finally got my hand on a copy, and I was really glad I did. This is a wonderful book. I think it got a Stonewall honor, maybe, and I can see why. This is just a fantastic book. It's about this boy named Carson Smith. He is from New York, but he and his mom moved to Billings for the summer to take care of his dad. He hasn't seen his dad in about 10 years, and he's an alcoholic, and he's dying of liver cirrhosis. And Carson isn't really sure what to do with him. He's really, really sick. He's still drinking, and he's in this house, and he's in Billings, Montana, where there's nothing to do, and he can't drive, and he just is miserable. And then one day he goes to the zoo and he meets this girl named Aisha, who's this gorgeous girl. And of course, he sees her from afar and thinks, ooh, I'm going to flirt with her. And it turns out she's gay. And so instead, they become best friends. And it turns out that Aisha is living in the zoo because she came out to her father and he kicked her out of the house, blaming religion. And so these kind of two lost characters find each other, and she starts living in the basement of Carson's house and keeping him company while he's going through this stuff with his father. And it so happens that there are a bunch of boxes in the basement, and he starts going through them, and he sees some mysterious papers that belong to his grandfather, and he meets the pastor down the road who also has some things that belong to his grandfather, and no one's talking about it, and no one knows what the story is, and all he knows is that his father's story is that his grandfather just disappeared one day and never came back, although he's finding this kind of evidence that maybe he didn't disappear, and maybe he's still alive, and what does it all mean? And so he goes on this great adventure, and this is where the story starts to remind me of Jeremy Fink in The Meaning of Life, where it's one puzzle that reaches, you get to another puzzle and you get to another puzzle, and there are these people along the way who are kind of looking out for him, and at the end he comes to this grand realization, and it's sad and it's hard and it's heartbreaking, but it's inevitably what he needs, and he finds his family at the end, and it's not the answer he expected, and I'm not going to ruin it for you because you really, really should read it. It's phenomenal, really, really good book. I think that this is one of those books that's going to appeal to kids who like the epic road trip books. It's going to appeal to kids who like GLBT issue books. This is going to appeal to kids who like the idea of, friends without romance, or just adventures. They travel all the way from Montana to San Francisco. They go all across, piece of pretty interesting countryside. So I highly recommend this book. I think that it's a wonderful story. It's going to appeal to a lot of different demographics, and it just has a wonderful message. And it's just good stuff. Good stuff. I'm glad I read it. All right, we're almost done, I promise. Okay. Walk on Earth, a Stranger. So Ray Carson wrote The Girl of Fire and Thorns, which I loved. This is her new trilogy, and this is the first book, and it's phenomenal. I loved it. It's not as dystopic as The Girl of Fire and Thorns. That's what it's called, right? The Girl of Fire and Thorns. Of course, I'm not going to see it. But it's interesting. It sets up an interesting story. So this is a book about a girl named Leah, and she has magic powers. And I will tell you, I've already said I'm not a huge fantasy fan, but her magic powers are pretty subtle. Basically, she can sense gold. She can sense when you're carrying it. She can sense it in the ground. And so in this is the time of the gold rush in the 1840s, this pretty valuable skill to have because people are looking for gold, and her family has definitely profited from this. But they have to be really careful because if anyone finds out that she has this skill, they might come after her. And so they keep it pretty well hidden. Now, she lives a pretty modest life. I think they live in, I want to say, North Carolina, maybe. I might have made that up. Anyway, they're living, a decent life, and she's hearing stories about the gold rush in California and is interested, but, she's with her parents, and her best friend lives nearby, and they kind of have a very young romance going on. I think she's 15, and but she isn't ready to strike out on her own. He actually ends up leaving to go to California to find gold, and she doesn't. In the middle of all of this, her parents are murdered, and she's not sure what happened, but she's pretty sure that it's her uncle who's found out that she has this power and has been looking for her. So what she ends up doing, and this is fantastic, is she disguises herself as Lee, dresses up as a boy, and goes on an adventure across the country to California. It has this awesome adventure, trying to work her way across the country. She gets mugged at one point. She gets attacked. Her gold is stolen. Her horse is stolen. All kinds of stuff happens. And she's being chased by this uncle, and she's kind of lost and kind of alone. And she eventually does make it to California, and she finds this family in a place that she didn't really expect to, and people really have her back, which is amazing. And she does end up safe in the end. I'm interested to see where the next book is going to pick up, because of course she does have this power, and now she's in California where all the gold is. But this adventure across the country is really something. I think that the magical realism aside, I think that kids are really going to like the adventure story. The gold rush is an interesting part of history. Kids are going to like the idea of traveling on riverboats and covered wagons, and the idea of killing buffalo, and their run-ins with Native Americans, and the racism there. There's a lot to talk about, lots and lots of history in this book. So I really, really liked it. All right, last but not least, Accident Season. Now this is a weird book. I had high hope for this book. I can't type. Here we go. I had high hopes for this book because it was pretty well advertised. It was kind of all over the place in media, but I don't know. I thought it started really well. I'm not sure about the ending. So this book, I think it takes place in England. It's either England or Australia. Don't quote me on that. But it's definitely not in the United States. And it's about this family. And this main character, a girl named Kara, is in this family where every October they have this thing called the accident season, and it starts on October 1st and it ends on Halloween, and they have these inexplicable accidents. Her father actually died in an accident a couple of years back. They always end up in the hospital. They end up with scrapes and bumps and bruises all the time, and it has gotten so bad that her mom won't let her out of the house without double gloves and extra tights, extra sweaters, because they're so afraid of being hurt in the month of October. And this is where the story gets weird, and that's that this character, Kara, she's also a high school student, and she has all this circle of friends, and they are looking at pictures one day, and she notices this girl named Elsie is in every single one of her pictures. And the weird thing is that nobody else remembers Elsie. And kind of the thread in this book is that in the high school they have something called the secrets box, and it's kind of like if you've ever seen the blog or the book Post Secret, where kids can type on an old-fashioned typewriter their secret so no one can recognize their handwriting, and then they put the piece of paper in this box, and then they create this big art display with them at the end of the year. So there's all these secrets flying around. And this girl Elsie can be found in the library by this secret box all the time, but the librarian doesn't know who she is, and nobody else seems to know who she is. And come to find out, she's kind of intertwined in this crazy accident season that they find out about. So I have to admit that I did not really understand the end of it. It's kind of like Bone Gap in that way, where it was pretty realistic. They're planning this Halloween party in this haunted house, and they all want to come as their secrets, and it's all teenager-ish. But then all of a sudden it took a left turn into crazy fantasy town, and Sharon got lost. They compare it to Practical Magic. I haven't read that book, but it definitely has an Alice Hoffman kind of feel to it. It's very atmospheric. So if you have kids who like that kind of thing, this might be a good one. There's some romance, definitely. It's grades 10 and up, probably because there's a mild amount of drinking, romance. I don't think there's any full-on sex, but there's quite a bit of sexual activity, hooking up with different people, and of course the blood and guts part of the accident season. So there's also some spellcasters in the group, which is a little weird and out of place, and one of them reads tarot cards all the time, and I don't really understand it. So my distaste of fantasy books aside, it did get really wonderful reviews in the journals. Like I said, even though I don't like fantasy, I really liked it up to the end. And then it got really weird, too weird for me. However, some of my friends who really like this style of book really loved it. So if you have fantasy fans in your library, high school ones, then this could be a good choice for you. All right, that's all I got for you right now. Is that enough? I'm furiously reading books for the Canfield Fisher Award right now, so be on the lookout for more of those, and I will catch you next month in February. I hope that you stay warm. Take care, everybody. Thank you.